You know, they say the perfect wave doesn't exist, but that it's in how much you trust the muscles in your body to spring into action at just the right moment. That it's in your fingertips where you first sense its energy. They say it's the salty air from the nearby sea that stimulates the creative spirit. The same spirit that founded the International Court of Justice and the seat of government for one of the most prosperous and progressive nations in Western Europe. There is something about it, this place. And why are international businesses rolling onto its shores? Why do conferences become memories that live on in everyone's mind? And why are events here a remarkable experience? Like the waves we catch and ride every day. Perhaps because it's within easy reach from major capitals in Europe and close to one of the busiest seaports in the world. It's gained the reputation of being a startup capital, with many flourishing hubs for technology, energy, social innovation, finance, the legal sector, and NGOs. It could also be its international and youthful demographic, offering diverse talent. Or maybe it's just that salty breeze that blows in over the dunes after all. Whichever it is, we're here to help you become part of it.
Good morning and a very warm welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar about the BVM, a limited liability company that primarily aims to positively impact society. So in other words, everyone who's working for the benefit of people and planet. The purpose of the new BVM is to better facilitate and recognize social enterprises in the Dutch legal framework. I'm Diana Eggleston. I'm a business advisor at the Hague Business Agency, and within our team, I'm responsible for the sectors impact economy and NGOs. For those of you who don't know us, we are a publicly funded non-profit organization, and we attract and assist foreign companies, NGOs, and international organizations with their expansion to the Netherlands. We do this by connecting them to a wide range of trusted service providers, to our partners and relevant players in the ecosystem, both in the public and private sector. Some of the services we provide are sharing relevant information, like we do today in this webinar, organizing tailored fact-finding trips, assisting with the incorporation process, also helping to find office space. In summary, we do all we can to provide a soft landing in The Hague for our clients. I'm joined today by Friederike Henke and Jan Greidanus of Buren. Buren is one of our partner organizations. They are an internationally oriented legal firm with offices in Beijing, Shanghai, The Hague, Amsterdam, Luxembourg. Friederike is a Dutch-German lawyer, and together with Jan, a civil law notary, she will introduce you to the BVM. They'll highlight the main characteristics and answer your questions. We have about 1 hour together, and the way we've structured it is on the screen now. So after some background information on the BVM, we will dive into the key characteristics. Then we will hear about the process of incorporating a BVM and also very specific tax aspects. Then there's a moment for you to ask your questions about the structural part before we look at what's happening in other countries. So for example, in Germany, we have a legal form that's called the GmbH. And some of you may be familiar already with the BCorp certification originating in the US. Then we will bring it all back to why The Hague is such a fertile ground for social enterprises, and have another opportunity to ask questions and engage with our speakers. Now, before we kick off, just a couple of practical points. This webinar is recorded, and like all our other webinars, it will be available in our YouTube library where you can view it. We'll also send out a summary afterwards with a link so you can share that information with colleagues. Please feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar. You will see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Now, without much further ado, I want to invite Friederike to take the floor. Friederike, please go ahead.
Thank you, Diana. Well, like you already said, we're going to start off with a little bit of background on the BVM. We agreed before we started the webinar that I would take on the difficult Dutch words. BVM stands for BV, and that is the Dutch abbreviation for besloten vennootschap met maatschappelijk doel. And then, so the BV is besloten vennootschap, limited liability company, and the M stands for maatschappelijk doel, which is a social objective. And as such, BVM stands for limited liability company with a social objective. The BVM has to have a social impact, and that can be different objectives. It can, as examples, and Jan will point out later the full list, but as examples, it can be a company that is active in the cultural sector, it can be a healthcare company, a company that focuses around sustainability or on human rights. Within the European Union, there are 16 EU member states which already have separate legislation for such companies. 16, and the Netherlands don't at this stage, at least, and there was really some catch up to do for the Netherlands, and the government decided 2 years ago to implement separate legislation for social entrepreneurs, and that led to a first regulation outline that was published last year. And the purpose of that new legislation, which is not in force yet, but it will come to already tell you now, we don't know yet when, but it will come. But the purpose is that it will recognize and facilitate social entrepreneurs in the Netherlands. When the government decided to implement such a separate legal framework, they also had KPMG perform a research, and from that research it shows that social entrepreneurs are really also wanting that recognition in order also to distinguish themselves from other companies. You see now a lot of window dressing and greenwashing happening, and it's really key to be able to show that you are really a social impact company in comparison to other companies that don't meet those requirements. That brings us to the 4 key characteristics that a BVM needs to meet. Next slide, please. We will first give an overview. These are the 4 key characteristics listed here on this slide. And then we will go into further detail on each of the key characteristics after this. The first key characteristic is that a BVM will have to have a social objective. That means that its business needs to have an impact on society, and that impact on society really comes first. The second key characteristic is that allocation of profits needs to be in line with the social aims. There is freedom, and there will be freedom for entrepreneurs as long as they keep the social objective up. The third key characteristics is that there will be specific rights for stakeholders, which is a broader range of interested party than currently for ordinary BVs. And the fourth characteristic will be that there will be special social reporting requirements for BVMs, which also show and give insight into the value that a BVM has added for society. We will now, get into further detail on all the key characteristics, and Jan will go into detail on the first, the social objective.
Yes, I'm going to tell you something about the first key characteristics of the BVM, and that are the social objects. The social objects are included in the Articles of Association of a BVM. And the Articles of Association are one of the constitutional documents of a BV and are firstly established upon its incorporation. And the Articles of Association have to include this object/objectives clause, which basically is a short description of the contemplated activities of this BVM. And in order for a BV to qualify as a BVM, the objects should pursue or promote a social objective. Now you may ask, what kind of social objects are we talking about here exactly? Well, as Friederike mentioned, the regulation outline includes a specific list which is exhaustive, and these lists include subjects that are deemed social for purposes of this BVM. And those lists include the following topics. Those are welfare, culture, education, science and research, protection of nature and the environment, healthcare, care of young people and the elderly, animal welfare, religion and spirituality, promotion of the democratic legal order, public housing, human rights, labor market participation, are a combination of these objectives. And it's a pretty extensive list, and after this meeting, we will share a link to our information bulletin that we published on our website, which also includes these lists with these different subjects. So in order for a BVM to qualify as such, the objects as included in the Articles of Association should match one of these objects as included in this list. And that is to make sure that this BVM is actually doing something social. Now, one might think, look, nice, we got these social objects, but who cares? We're going to do something else. We're going to do something non-social. Well, the Dutch legislator addressed this and commented that in case the management board of directors of a BVM is on a structural basis ignoring the objectives as included in the Articles of Association, acting outside of the scope of these objects, then each interested party or the public prosecutor may initiate proceedings with the Dutch court to have this BVM dissolved. And it should be noted that this is likely very rare to occur. And there's also another aspect, that in case a director acts outside of the scope of these objects, then under specific circumstances, he could be held personally liable by its co-directors or its succeeding directors. What I'm trying to say here is that the objectives, as included in the Articles of Association, the social objects, should not be taken lightly, and that the activities of this BVM should match these social objects. Let's continue with the other key characteristic. Head back to Friederike.
Yeah, the second one, that is all about the allocation of profits. That means not only profit allocation, but also profit distribution. As said, the priority within a BVM needs to lie with its social objective. There will still be freedom for shareholders to distribute profits, but that freedom will be restricted by the social objective. That means that the profits are predominantly to be allocated to the company itself. There is a reference point mentioned that 50% of the profits need to be reinvested and be held in the company to maintain its financial stability, and that the other 50% may be distributed as profits, but that is not a fixed number in the current regulation outline. But there is the possibility to distribute profits. At the same time, as for the current ordinary BV as it is in place in the current Dutch legislation, there is a possibility for the management board to withhold its approval for the actual payment of a distribution of profits. So the general meeting of shareholders takes the resolution to distribute profit, and also in the current situation, on the basis of current Dutch legislation, the board of directors has to basically approve of such payment and needs to check whether the payment of the dividend would lead to the company getting into trouble financially. And if it doesn't, if it would get into financial instability due to the payment, then the management board would have to withhold its approval and not pay out the dividend. And in addition, the BVM will also introduce the possibility for the board to withhold its approval in case that the distribution would interfere with the BVM's social objectives. In addition to that, there will be another responsibility for the management board of a BVM, and that is that it has to propose social profit and reserve policy, and that policy needs to be signed off by the general meeting of shareholders, and it has to be made publicly available. In essence, for shareholders, this characteristic would mean that they would have a lower financial gain, but they would be shareholder in a company that has social impact. Moving on to the third key characteristic, which is about stakeholder rights. That is in addition to the one that Jan already mentioned. Jan already mentioned the possibility to request dissolution of a BVM in case the social objectives are not actually pursued. But in addition to that, there will be more governance rights for other stakeholders. And that is that more stakeholders than only the shareholders will be entitled to exert influence over board resolutions if these are contrary to the company's social purpose. And that means that stakeholders can issue objections in case there is a proposal to do a demerger or a merger of the company, in case there is the proposal to dissolve the company or to convert the BVM. And these stakeholders will probably include, in addition to the shareholders, also the financing parties and contractors as well as customers. And then an additional right for stakeholders to get involved with the BVM is to initiate proceedings with the Enterprise Chamber. The Enterprise Chamber is a special court in the Netherlands which deals with internal relations within companies. And what is special about this additional right is that this would enable another legal entity to interfere with the BVM's workings. And it will introduce a right for foundations, and only those foundations who have the same social objective as the BVM, to start legal proceedings at the Enterprise Chamber. And that is in case there is mismanagement within that BVM. And these foundations, these stakeholders can then request the Enterprise Chamber to start inquiry proceedings. Well, moving back to Jan for the last key characteristics, which is the social reporting requirements.
Yes, thank you, Friederike. The social reporting requirement is the final key characteristics of the BVM as distinguished by the Dutch legislator, and that's a publication requirement. In addition to the publication requirement of the social profit and reserve policy just mentioned by Friederike. And as you may know, a BV and also BVM will already have this obligation to publish annual figures, namely its annual accounts. In addition to that, it also has to prepare a social report. It should be prepared by the board, and it is yet to be determined what exactly should be included in this report. But in any case, it is likely based on this regulation outline that what must be included are the objectives of this BVM, the activities, and the value added to society when performing these activities. And once this social report has been prepared by the board, it should be then made public together with the filings of the annual accounts with the Dutch Trade Register. And any interested person, any interested party can look up this social report against a very small fee of a couple of euros likely. And then this interested person can judge for himself how much this BVM is adding to society. Now I would like to tell you something about the question: how do you get this BVM? How do you obtain a BVM? Well, as Friederike mentioned, there is just at this point in time only a regulation outline. It's not yet possible to get this BVM, and hopefully in the near future it will be possible. But based on the regulation outline, we can already give you a picture of how it's likely that the incorporation will look like. And there are basically, based on the regulation outline, two manners in which a company can get this BVM qualification. And first of all, you can incorporate a brand new BV, and already upon its incorporation, have the articles of association comply with the obligations on the BVM, which basically means the objects clause has to be social, as I just mentioned. And there is also a different manner to get this BVM. You can convert your existing BV into a BVM by amending its articles of association and bring those articles of association in line with the legislation on the BVM. And in both cases, either the incorporation manner or the conversion manner, in both cases, the notary will have to issue a statement that according to his analysis, this BVM complies with the rules on the BVM. So in my opinion, it's actually pretty easy to get a BVM. It's just basically check the box, and afterwards this company will have to prove its value that is adding to society. And once the notary has either executed this deed of incorporation or the articles of association, then he will update the registration with the Dutch Trade Register. And what I think is one of the nice things about this BVM is that the Dutch Trade Register will mention the abbreviation BVM in its name, as already also pointed out by my colleague Friederike. And the nice thing about that is that everyone will see, can acknowledge that this BV has this social goal and this primary social goal. And the Dutch legislator comment that this is likely going to be beneficial for the social entrepreneur, because third parties will recognize this social goal immediately based on the name of the BVM. And there is also one quite recent development in the Dutch legal framework that we would like to make you aware of, and that's also impacting BVMs, and that is the UBO register. Each company, also BVMs, will have to register its UBOs in a public register, and the UBO is an ultimate beneficial owner. And for purposes of this UBO register, an UBO is a natural person that holds an interest either by voting rights or economical rights of at least 25%. So that's, I think, good to know for anyone that is considering to start a business in the Netherlands and specifically a BVM.
And that is also not only for the BVM, but it's also applicable to the current BVs. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. Now let's continue with the tax aspects. I think it's also relevant for the audience to know something about the tax aspects. It should be noted that I am a deputy civil law notary, but at Buren we also have tax experts, a tax advisor, and together with one of my colleagues, I prepared this sheet just to be able to tell you something about the tax aspects. And first of all, it should be noted that from the regulation outline, it appears that the BVM will treat it from a Dutch corporate tax law perspective similarly as an ordinary BV. That means that there will be no specific exemptions applicable to this BVM. And nevertheless, if you intend to start your business here in the Netherlands, either as a BV or as a BVM, or already have your business running here, then yeah, you're going to have to pay taxes at a certain point in time. And in the Netherlands, a couple of taxes are recognized. First of all, we have this corporate tax, this corporate income tax, which has to be paid on the profit that is made by the BV/BVM. And we have included the applicable rates here on this sheet. And it should be also noted that some exemptions may apply depending on the circumstances. We also have the Dutch dividend withholding tax that is due on profit that's going to be distributed from the BV or BVM to one of its shareholders, and the general rate is 15%, and also here exemptions are applicable under certain circumstances. Then we have the VAT, which is an abbreviation that stands for value added tax, and in short is a tax that has to be paid on the value added by an entrepreneur on the services or the products that he or she is providing for. And there are 3 rates applicable. The 21% rate is the general rate. The 9% rate is generally applicable to food and beverages. The 0% rate is applicable in case it concerns, for instance, financial products. Wage tax and social security contributions have to be paid in case this BVM will have employees. The rates go up to 49.5%. Gift tax, that is also something that can be relevant for a BVM. Because it's imaginable, I think, that a BVM at a certain point in time receives a contribution, a gift from a donor. And the general principle under Dutch law is that the recipient of the gift has to pay the taxes. And there are 2 rates, basically, the 30% and the 40% rate. And the 40% rate is applicable in case a certain threshold is met, and this threshold is currently set on 130,000 euros. And finally, I would like to make more of a technical comment. We also in the Netherlands have this NBI status, which is reserved for specific organization, which most of the times are foundations that also serve the public benefit. But the Dutch legislator mentioned that BVM cannot obtain this NBI status.
That already answers one of the questions, whether the objectives are comparable to the NBI category.
Yeah, the objectives are basically similar. So that's a good question. And also the Dutch legislator in its notes to this legislative proposal made the comparisons to the NBI, and those social goals are really comparable.
Great. Thank you both so much. Yes, that was the first question I also picked out because I was curious to hear the list that you read out, and I see that most of the SDGs are reflected indeed in these objectives. So it is pretty much in line, then you said, with similar to the UNBI list. Another question was about the specific rights for stakeholders. Does that also include employees You didn't mention the employees, but I think in addition to making a company much more attractive to those employees that want to work for a purposeful organization, I just wonder, and Laure, actually, thank you for the question, also wonders whether the stakeholders include the employees as well. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, of course, of course. It is not an additional stakeholder as such mentioned in the current regulation outline. I must say that I think it would be a good addition, but on the basis of current Dutch law, which also will apply to the BVM, it is possible for the Works Council, which basically represents the employees in bigger companies, to also have rights to start enterprise chamber proceedings. But that is obviously not applicable to smaller companies, because only Works Councils are only implemented in companies which have more than 50 employees. At the same time, it could be something that could be included by a BVM itself I'm not sure if it's possible to include it in the Articles of Association, but you could make an agreement with an employee representation body, which allots them rights to interfere with certain decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Friederike. Caroline, hi, great that you're joining us. Two questions from Caroline. So the first one is, does a BV need to have a board and or external shareholders, or can a BVM also be held 100% by one person? That's the first question. I'll read out the second one as well. Is with no tax benefits, how does the Dutch government expect more social enterprises to start and survive, since it's already an uphill battle financially for a social enterprise? So I'll give the floor to colleagues at Buren. You decide, please, who wants to answer these questions.
I'm happy to answer those questions. First of all, the BVM is basically a BV which has some additional requirements be applicable. And to answer the first question of Caroline, can it have just one shareholder or one board member? That's also possible for the BV. So it will also be possible for a BVM to have just one shareholder and one board member. That's perfectly possible under the regulation outline. I hope that answers your question. I suggest we continue with the second question about the uphill battle. And that's a good question, because we just had this consultation process. This regulation outline has been published, and there were a high number of reactions, ranging from scholars to also social organizations. And one of the arguments that we saw a lot made were indeed the benefits, that there was this voice for having indeed tax benefits, and it's yet to be determined whether there will be any. But based on the regulation outline, one of the main benefits of this BVM would be its recognizability, because everyone will know that this is a BVM, and that it would be more likely for third parties, for consumers, to engage with this BVM because it has this primary social goal. So that's what the current status is.
Thank you, Jan. Well, I'm very much hoping that there will be indeed also a tax incentive. And I think you partially answered Thomas's question, which is what are the main benefits from the perspective of the entrepreneur to do business via BVM as opposed to the BV? So actually, Thomas, indeed, it's the recognizability. I think also for impact investors specifically, to understand who they're dealing with. I want to work for a company that is purpose-driven. I am seeking to invest in a company that is puts purpose before profit, etc. But if you want to add any other reasons, Jan or Friederike?
Yeah, well, the distinction, like I mentioned in the beginning at the introduction, the distinction when compared to other companies, also with the well, window dressing that you see coming up, where companies are using their social goals, which they don't actually have, in order to show off, and a social company, impact-driven BVM can only be a BVM if it isn't window dressing, if in the end. So that also be
quite strict, because it's very strict and also being monitored then by the government, that indeed you follow those objectives. So you mentioned about a few areas that are still under development, whether it's the tax or the actual date for the implementation of this legal form. We had one question early on about how we can keep updated on the legislative developments. I know Buren has a great newsletter on the topic. Jan, what is the best way to stay updated on how the legislative development is progressing?
I myself and also Friederike will keep a close eye on the legislative developments, and once there is one, we will resonate that by publishing. I think we'll publish a new newsletter about it, and also we'll post it on our LinkedIn. So if anyone is interested to keep track of the developments, I would recommend him or her to subscribe for our newsletter.
And we will share the link in the follow-up email, which will be sent after the webinar by the Hague Business Agency.
Excellent, great. Okay, so let's move on. Friederike, you also lead the German desk, of course, at Buren. So I'll hand back to you to tell us a little bit about different structures or forms abroad. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Diana, I indeed lead the German desk, and I've been told I'm very loyally to state this, but I need to say that we only advise on Dutch law, not on German law, and so this is only to give you an idea and not to give an extensive German law presentation. In Germany, you have various models to implement your social enterprise into, and there's one is the GmbH, and well, the GmbH stands for Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, limited liability company, and then the G, the first G is the word gemeinnützig, which means charitable social. So it is the social enterprise legal form in Germany currently. This one does have, in comparison to the current one as proposed in the Netherlands, does have a tax benefit, because the profits which are used for the social objects are tax-free. And it is a legal form that is used frequently by hospitals in Germany and by kindergartens. And it has, when compared to the BVM, an additional requirement, which is that in the Articles of Association of the GmbH, the beneficiary of the business needs to be incorporated, which is a requirement that the Articles of Association of a BVM would not have. Also, it is a non-profit company, and it is generally not allowed to pursue profits or to distribute them. And I mentioned to you before, the BVM would allow for profits to be distributed. And the 50% of the profits that could be distributed, that is kind of a reference point. So it is very different from that perspective from the GmbH. And the other legal form that is in the making in Germany is the GmbH VE, so then again, the GmbH stands for limited liability company, and then the V and the E, you see that on the right side of the slide. The V and the E stand for Verantwortungseigentum, which basically means that the company will own itself. It's a ownership of responsibility, it is a company that, like I said, is in the making, and it will be rather similar to the GmbH in that sense that it doesn't allow for profits to be distributed either. The Netherlands really have this open norm that profits can be distributed as long as the social objective of the company comes first. We would also like to make a comparison to the maybe more well-known BCorp, and Jan has the floor.
Happy to elaborate on that. To start with the well-known BCorp, that is a certification that is granted to a profit organization on its social and environmental performance. It is a certification that is granted by the so-called B-Lab. And it's B-Lab is an organization that's acting worldwide. It has offices in almost every major city, I believe. And in order for a company to qualify as a B Corp, to get this B Corp certification, it has to receive a score of at least 80% on the specific assessment. So the business of this existing company will have to be assessed. And in order for this company to maintain its B Corp certification, it will have to be re-evaluated every 3 years, and it will have to pay an annual fee. And the amount of this annual fee is based on the revenue of this company. And at this time, there are around 5,000 B Corps. And perhaps the most well-known B Corp is Ben & Jerry's. So what are the differences with the BVM? Well, in my opinion, from a legal perspective, the BVM is entirely different. The BVM is a legal entity that's made possible by the Dutch legislator, the Dutch government, whereas the B Corp is something that is arranged for privately. The BVM should primarily focus on the social objects. I should correct myself, should exclusively focus on these social objects, whereas this B Corp can also have other big goals, like selling ice creams in case of Ben & Jerry's. So that's the difference, and how to obtain each of them. The BVM, you just incorporate the entity or convert an existing entity, or an existing BV, and then you'll basically check the box, and then you'll have this this BVM. Whereas if you have the B Corp, then it's more of a substance over form approach, and there is really going to be an assessment of an existing business. But ultimately, the BVM and the B Corp serve the same goal. They both aim to make the world a better place, and that's correct.
So there was a question, I don't know, we actually have 2 minutes. I don't know if you have any insights into the French entreprise à mission, how they are set up and potentially compare. But of course, if that's not your field of expertise, we'll just skip this question.
We both looked at each other and were nodding, shaking our heads. So I'm afraid we cannot answer this question.
No, okay, no worries. Great. So let me just see. There's one other question that I've just received on a different channel about the report, actually, and I want to address that before I move on. Just to summarize, the social reporting requirements, is this a one-time report or is it a series of periodic reports?
Based on the regulation outline, this report has to be prepared each year and should be published together with the annual account. So it's a yearly thing.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, if we just, sorry, I skipped to Q&A, but it was just a couple of questions. Jone, can you please go back to the previous slide again? So to you that have joined us for this webinar, those who know The Hague and our ecosystem, I'm sure you understand why we got really excited about this topic. And also, if we think back to the video that we saw at the beginning of this session, I really think that we can categorize the main reason under these 4 bullets that you see on the screen, which also explains how the BVM topic is really so important for us. So first and foremost, I really want to highlight our Impact City ecosystem. It really is a unique ecosystem. We very consciously attract those companies that combine doing good and doing business. We really, when we look at also the objectives in terms of the kind of companies we want to attract or continue attracting to The Hague, it's really those that add value to our ecosystem rather than just the big companies. So for the Impact City ecosystem, which started in 2015 as the startup program of The Hague, in the meantime has really evolved into one of Europe's leading impact ecosystems, even recognized by the European Commission as best practice in Europe. This is fantastic news. The many entrepreneurs that have set up here, both international, but also Dutch entrepreneurs that really work on innovations for a better world. It will be fantastic that they can be recognized, which will also make it easier for them to attract the kind of impact investing venture philanthropy capital that they need. Actually, just also on that, the Impact City ecosystem and how it's evolved. In the Global Impact Ecosystem Index of last year, The Hague jumped 134 places in the global ranking. We're now ranked number 2 after Amsterdam. But what this report actually fails to highlight is that we are the only city in the world that really positions itself as Impact City. So deliberately attracts and facilitates those that combine doing good and doing business. And what's particularly nice, of course, that it's all grown on this DNA of peace and justice. So I always say we have a value proposition that has really integrity. And then also the impact investing cluster is growing and maturing in The Hague. We have more and more impact investors, venture philanthropies that are setting up here. Of course, we always think about the phrase follow the money, but I also think that money follows opportunities. So last year, the Netherlands Advisory Board on Impact Investing was also launched here, which is part of the Global Steering Group on Impact Investing. Actually, they've published a report together with KPMG earlier this year on the state of the Dutch impact investing ecosystem. We're also happy to share that link, and we have Lore of the NAP joining the session today. Then, of course, we have a wide range of hubs, not just startup hubs, but also communities that cater to different sectors. So we have the Hague Humanity Hub that most of you will be familiar with. We have Apollo 14, of course, the physical heart of Impact City. We have the Hague Tech that has a lot of tech entrepreneurs, but the majority of those really work on tech for good solutions. And also Campus at Sea, which is in the harbor of Scheveningen, which houses entrepreneurs that work on ocean, water, new energy solutions. And then, of course, there's a lot of free support from the Hague Business Agency and also the municipality to support and facilitate and really help these entrepreneurs to thrive. Just some examples of the programs. We have a soft landing program for selected entrepreneurs that combine doing good and doing business. We help them with a program, market readiness training, integration into the ecosystem. So this is a program that during COVID, we also pivoted to a digital soft landing program. There are several events to connect entrepreneurs to capital. So The Hague, the municipality of The Hague, they have various programs. Matchmaking with investors, but also generally support with accessing public funding as well. Then international market expansion. Of course, what we do at the Hague Business Agency, our primary mandate is to bring companies to set up their European office, access Europe from the Netherlands, from The Hague, but also we help with further market expansion. So we have an international market entry coaching program that entrepreneurs that are based in The Hague can also sign up to. We really want to help them to scale their impact globally from The Hague, from Impact City. And then a date for your agendas already. On October 11th, we will host this year's Impact Fest, which is our flagship event that really brings together everyone who works on solutions that benefit people and planet. So for Impact Fest this year, we are actually partnering with the Global Impact Investing Network, GIN. It's on October 11th, and this is really a great place to meet investors, entrepreneurs, corporates, academia, and also government representatives and NGOs. So I would like to see if there are any more questions. We have a few minutes. Please don't be shy. Our speakers are still here, even if you can't see them. No more questions. I have one additional one here. I think, Jan, you referred to this already. Probably this is answered. So there is a question, when can we reasonably expect this new legal form to come into effect? I don't even know, Jan and Friederike, if you could say whether it's going to be within a year or more than a year. If it's within a year, I think that's quite a nice horizon to look towards.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question to answer. Last year there was this regulation outline published, after which a consultation period of 1 month started. And at this moment, I think that the Dutch legislator is reviewing all the reactions. And as I mentioned, there were a very high number of reactions to this regulation outline, which I think also emphasize how much social entrepreneurship is a thing here in the Netherlands. My reasonably expectation is that we, in the next months, we will have a big development in the form of an official legislative proposal issued by the Dutch Minister of Justice. So yeah, like I said before, if there are any developments, then we'll immediately share those.
Excellent. Well, then all that remains is to really say a heartfelt thank you to Friederike and Jan. Thank you also to our great team, Yone, Luba, for preparing this webinar. And thank all of you for joining us. We will follow up with a summary of the session, but also with a link, of course, to the recording. Please share it with your colleagues. Stay in touch with us, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, sign up to our newsletter, check out our YouTube library, which has many useful webinars stored there. And yeah, then I just wish you a great day and hope to see you soon, even in person. Bye-bye.